Welcome back to our channel. Today is a truly beautiful day to be a fan of this incredible show, and I am absolutely buzzing with adrenaline to dive into the latest heart-stopping developments. Grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's unpack the absolute cinematic masterpiece that just unfolded on our screens. I have to start by talking about my absolute favorite heart-stopping moment from the recent storyline, the fatal confrontation in Drew Kane's hospital room. I was literally holding my breath when Willow Kane stood over Drew's bed with that stolen vial of the antidote. The way the director chose to light that scene, casting these harsh, clinical, fluorescent shadows across Willow's face while Drew's eyes darted frantically in. His locked-in state made me feel an overwhelming sense of dread and anticipation. I feel like this was the exact moment the show elevated itself from a standard daytime drama to a premium psychological thriller because the visual storytelling was so incredibly tight. When Jen Sidwell stepped out of the darkness, my jaw hit the floor. I believe that this sequence is the pinnacle of the current season because it perfectly married the emotional weight of Willow's crushing guilt with the sheer, unadulterated terror of Sidwell's ruthless ambition. I know a lot of people in the fandom are saying this storyline has been too dark, or that Willow's sudden demise feels like a betrayal of her long-term character journey, but I actually think this tragic climax is exactly what was needed. The way I interpret it, Willow has been drowning in a sea of her own making for weeks, and this was the inevitable breaking point. I feel so incredibly validated by her recent scenes, especially that moment when she broke down in tears in front of Harrison Chase, confessing that she was guilty of so much. I believe the writers have been meticulously laying the groundwork for her psychological collapse. She couldn't bear the weight of her sins anymore. Seeing Drew trapped in his own body, a prisoner of the paralytic she herself helped administer, finally shattered her completely. I think her decision to risk everything to steal that antidote wasn't just about saving Drew. It was a desperate, fatal attempt to save her own soul. And I feel like that makes her final moments profoundly poetic. Let's talk about the sheer tension of the lab heist that preceded the hospital room confrontation. I love the way the camera followed Willow as she infiltrated Sidwell's laboratory. In my opinion, the pacing of that sequence was brilliant because it made me feel like I was right there with her. My own heart pounding in my chest. Every time she looked over her shoulder at the lab equipment, I felt this visceral panic. I think the choice to have her hands visibly shaking as she grabbed the antidote vial was a masterclass in subtle acting. It proved to me that she wasn't some hardened criminal mastermind. She was a terrified, guilt-ridden woman making a desperate, clumsy play for redemption. The way I see it, that trembling hand was the physical manifestation of her crumbling conscience. I feel like the writers wanted us to root for her redemption, only to pull the rug out from under us in the most devastating way possible, which is exactly why I watch this genre. But the absolute genius of the writing revealed itself, with the hidden camera reveal. I genuinely think we're missing the point if we don't acknowledge how terrifyingly brilliant Jen Sidwell is in this arc. I feel a chill down my spine just thinking about the fact that Sidwell had anticipated her betrayal and set a trap right at Drew's bedside. When the perspective shifted to that grainy black and white security footage showing Willow approaching Drew, I audibly gasped. I think it was a phenomenal directorial choice because it made us, the audience, complicit in Sidwell's voyeurism. We were watching her walk into a lethal snare. I feel like this specific detail proved that Sidwell is always 10 steps ahead, making him one of the most formidable, terrifying adversaries Port Charles has ever seen. And we absolutely cannot talk about this scene without discussing Drew Kane's silent performance. I feel like this is the best they've written and directed Drew's locked-in state, because the sheer agony conveyed through his eyes alone was heartbreaking. The way I interpret his micro-expressions in that hospital bed, he wasn't just scared for himself, he was terrified for Willow. When she leaned in whispering that she had the cure, the camera zoomed in on a single tear falling from Drew's eye. I believe that tear represented his horrific realization that she was walking into a slaughter. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move to protect her. And I think that absolute physical helplessness amplified the horror of the scene tenfold. I feel so deeply for him, forced to be a silent, paralyzed witness to the woman he loves, and the woman who tormented him, meeting her violent end right in front of him. When Sidwell finally revealed himself stepping into the dim light of the hospital room, the shift in the room's atmosphere was palpable. I love the way the ambient hospital machine noises seemed to fade out, leaving only the chilling, measured cadence of Sidwell's voice. I think the writer struck gold with his dialogue here. He didn't yell, he didn't rant like a cartoon villain. He spoke with this terrifying, calculated calmness, I feel like his realization that Willow was no longer a reliable ally, but rather the biggest threat to his master plan to take over Aurora Media, was the ultimate turning point of the entire year. The way I see it, Sidwell views human lives as mere chess pieces on a corporate board. When he coldly stated that her death would serve as a lesson to anyone who dares to betray me, I felt a genuine sense of despair. I believe this is what makes him such a compelling villain, his absolute lack of hesitation when a piece no longer serves his grand design. I want to dive deeper into Sidwell's motivation regarding Aurora Media because I think it adds such a rich, complex layer of corporate espionage to this deeply personal tragedy. I feel like some fans are missing how beautifully these two plotlines have merged. Sidwell's obsession with acquiring Aurora Media isn't just about money. It's about absolute power and control over the media landscape of Port Charles. I believe that when he caught Willow with the antidote, he didn't just see a woman trying to save her husband. He saw a massive gaping leak in his impenetrable corporate armor. I think his dialogue about her being a liability proved that he is entirely devoid of human empathy. The way I interpret it, he killed her, not out of passion or rage, but as a cold, calculated business transaction to secure his assets. I feel like that specific framing makes the murder infinitely more disturbing and brilliant. The actual execution of Willow's death scene is something I will be thinking about for years to come. I know a lot of people are complaining online that it happened too fast, that she didn't get a grand, sweeping final monologue to say goodbye. But I actually think the abruptness is exactly what makes it a masterpiece of television. I feel like real violence is sudden, ugly, and entirely unromantic, and the show captured that reality perfectly. Before she could even let out a scream for help, Sidwell silenced her permanently. I love the choice to cut the background music completely at the exact moment he struck. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I think it left me feeling hollow and breathless, which is exactly how a major character death should feel to a dedicated viewer. I believe the writers respected the audience enough to not romanticize her murder. They presented it as the brutal, senseless act of a tyrant, and I applaud them for that bold choice. What makes this entire sequence even more heartbreaking for me is the dramatic irony of what is happening elsewhere in Port Charles at the exact same time. I feel a profound sense of tragedy when I think about Michael Corinthos. The way I see it, Michael has been so consumed with his petty vindictive plot to set up a cheating trap for Willow and Chase, completely oblivious to the mortal danger his wife was actually in. I think the juxtaposition of Michael scheming with his private investigator Elaine, while Willow was literally fighting for her life in Sidwell's grasp, is some of the most brilliant narrative weaving the show has done in a decade. I believe that when Michael finally learns the truth that while he was trying to ruin her reputation, she was being murdered, the guilt will absolutely destroy him. I feel like this heavy irony elevates the standard soap opera tropes into genuine Shakespearean tragedy. The ripple effect of Willow's sudden death is going to completely upend the canvas, and I am here for every single second of it. I genuinely think the writers have just injected a massive dose of adrenaline into the show's veins. I feel so much anticipation thinking about how the rest of the characters are going to react to this violent shockwave. How will Nina Reeves handle losing her daughter in such a brutal manner, especially right after they were starting to navigate this new dangerous partnership with Jack Brennan? I believe Nina's grief is going to morph into a terrifying, unquenchable thirst for vengeance. The way I interpret the upcoming fallout, Sidwell hasn't just eliminated a corporate threat. He has awakened an army of grieving, angry Port Charles residents who will stop at absolutely nothing to tear his empire down to the studs. I also have to talk about Harrison Chase in this context because my heart is breaking for him. I feel so deeply for Chase, especially considering their recent scenes together. I think the fact that Chase was the one comforting Willow, holding her while she cried, and confessed her vague guilt about being guilty of so much, makes her death a million times more tragic. I love the gentleness Chase showed her in that scene at her house. It was so authentic to his character. I believe he is going to be haunted by the fact that he couldn't protect her, that he didn't understand what she was truly apologizing for until it was entirely too late. The way I see it, Chase is going to channel all that unresolved grief and confusion into his police work. I feel like this tragedy is the catalyst that will finally bring Sidwell's criminal enterprise crashing down, with Chase relentlessly leading the charge in the name of the woman he once loved. Returning to Jen Sidwell, I think this murder officially cements his legacy as one of the all-time great villains of daytime television. I know that's a bold statement, but I genuinely believe it with my whole chest. I feel like his arrogance in that hospital room, the way he looked down at Willow's lifeless body and then stared directly into the lens of his own hidden camera, almost as if he was daring anyone to challenge. His authority was chilling to the bone. I think the actor's performance has been an absolute revelation this season. The way I interpret his subtle smirks and the cold, unfeeling deadness in his eyes, He truly believes he is a god among insects, entirely untouchable by the law. I feel like the writers are setting him up for a massive, catastrophic fall, and by making him so irredeemably evil here, they are ensuring that his eventual defeat will be the most satisfying, cathartic payoff in the show's long history. I want to take a moment to analyze the physical prop of the antidote vial itself, because I think the director used it brilliantly as a visual motif throughout the episode. I feel like that tiny glass vial represented all of Willow's remaining hope. When it slipped from her fingers and shattered on the hospital floor during the struggle, I felt my own heart shatter with it. I believe that the sound of the breaking glass was the perfect auditory punctuation mark to her life ending. The way I see it, the shattered cure pooling on the floor next to Drew's bed is a haunting metaphor for how her attempts to fix her mistakes only resulted in permanent destruction. I think focusing the camera on that broken glass while Sidwell delivered his final chilling line was a stroke of absolute cinematic genius that I will never forget. Finally, I want to touch on what this all means for Willow's legacy as a character on this canvas. I know her recent actions drugging Drew. Keeping him locked in a paralyzed state have made her highly controversial and divisive among the fandom. But I actually think her final act of sacrifice beautifully redeems her character. I feel like she died trying to right her horrific wrongs. I believe that when she held that antidote, she wasn't the manipulative villain she had become in recent weeks. She was the compassionate, loving, desperate Willow we originally fell in love with years ago. The way I see it, her character arc is a beautiful, deeply tragic exploration of how good, well-meaning people can be driven to do terrible things out of fear and desperation, and how the path to redemption is often paved with immense ultimate sacrifice. I think this entire storyline is a breathtaking triumph of character-driven storytelling.